it going, YouTube? Today I wanted to talk a little bit about power creep and what I believe about power creep currently in PoE. And then I wanted to talk a little bit about aura stackers in 3.15 and what all of this announcement news means for aura stackers, because I still believe that aura stackers will probably be one of the best builds in the game. Now, in this video right here, you can see that this clear speed is pretty fast. So you might be wondering, when is this from? This guy has like 8,000 ES. He seems to be pretty fast. His whirling blade speed is insane. He's just killing everything, right? He has head on buffs. Is this from the last league or something, or a little bit ago? And this is just to illustrate that power creep, or in terms of player power, has always existed in the game. That players have always been exceptionally powerful. And that's just how it's always been, regardless of what GGG may want you to believe. Because this clip is actually from a video recorded in 2.2. It is actually from a long time ago. It was called Low Light Spectral Throw. So back in the day, there was stuff in the game that was just as powerful and just as overpowered as right now. So a lot of this like nostalgia about old school PoE is kind of like misguided in a sense, because of there's builds back then that was just as fast, just as strong, just as powerful, and will one-shot pretty much any endgame boss immediately. Now, the big thing that is different about it now is there's one thing that I think changes everything, which is knowledge. People in the past did not have the same knowledge as nowadays in PoE players, and having that knowledge absolutely changes the whole equation, because people are able to go on PoE Ninja, they're able to look up their favorite builds and pretty much copy it one-to-one with Path of Building. So this thing was from 2.2, and it was actually recorded in like 2016. So this was actually a long time ago, and that just shows you that, oh no, why did I log into Royale? That just shows you that power creep is something that has existed in the game forever, and GGG does usually rein it in. That build that was low like Spectral Throw got nerfed with the Crown of Eyes. It got nerfed from a lot of different ways. I don't really remember what they exactly changed to it, but it went from the most popular skill in the game to one of the worst. But I also wanted to talk a little bit about the campaign and why it is kind of useless to try to bump up the difficulty for no reason. So right here, I'm on Reddit because it's usually a pretty good way to take into account like what noobs think about certain things. So right here is a question: how long is Path of Exile campaign? Just wondering about the length. So one of the responses is 10 acts, probably 20 plus hours on your first playthrough, pretty long for a tutorial. So people actually consider the campaign as pretty much a tutorial of sorts, because there's a lot of people who will tell a beginner the game does not actually begin until you finish the campaign and kind of unlock your map device. There's even some professional game reviewers that
Diana left channel and disconnected.
That claims 75 hours. Technically, that's still 20 plus. And yeah, 20 to 40 hours seems very reasonable. So you can see that for the beginner, the campaign takes a long time. It is not easy by any stretch of the imagination. This person here says, I'm at Act 3 and it took me 15 hours so far. This person says 75 hours. This person says I have something like 2.5k hours and it takes me 11 hours on average. And this is an experienced player. It takes me roughly about 8 hours to finish all 10 acts and side quests. So this begs the question of why exactly is GGG dedicating so many resources to slowing down the campaign? The campaign should just be something that a beginner can play through. They can feel that character getting more and more powerful throughout it, and then they can experience the actual game of PoE, which is the end game, which consists of running maps, doing bosses, and choosing your own adventure in relation to different league mechanics. So making the experience even more hard and unenjoyable for a beginner is an awful idea for new players in the game. And not only that, even for like veteran players, it's just annoying having to deal with a campaign that takes longer and longer and longer. There are so many people I know that really refuse to level up a character anymore because they don't want to go through the campaign again. There's so many people who would probably pay, if they could, in currency for someone to just rush them through the whole campaign so they don't actually have to do it. A lot of people even want adventure mode or something so you can just do maps to level. So having a hard campaign is really just a slap in the face to anyone who wants to play a lot of builds. It's also a slap in the face to people who want to be new to the game and then just are completely destroyed by the mobs. the game in terms of a tutorial for the campaign is so bad in terms of actually telling what like a beginner needs. So if you go here, so many people have no idea how important resists are. So they go here, they do not have 75 resist. Oh, I don't have 75 resist either. Maybe that's why this character is level 69 and is never leveling up. But as you can see, the campaign being harder does nothing. I feel like for a general player base, it really, no one is complaining about how hard the campaign is. Like, if you want to make the game actually harder in a meaningful way, I feel that like maybe white and yellow maps and mobs can be a little harder. So it remains to be seen what they actually mean by having a harder campaign, but I'm pretty against the fact of tuning the Act 1 mob super hard or something like that, or making the campaign even more tedious than it currently is. Because even for me, even though it would take me like 3 hours or 4 hours at League launch to get the maps, for the general people who like are new to the game, it's a miserable experience. And there is a reason why there's a stat that says like 50% of people don't even kill Brutus, so maybe that'll be 75% now, because who knows, they'll probably just die in the climb to some goats. But basically that's what I personally think about making the campaign harder. I'm all for making the rest of the game harder after maps, but the campaign is just such a miserable experience. You don't even really get to play your build. So many, the combat feels so bad without support gems, honestly, and it just feels awful until you get some heralds in your build or a few support gems or something like that, or a different skill. So making Act 1 harder, in my opinion, is just not good for the health of the game. So I know a lot of people watching are probably wondering about how the 3.15 announcement actually affects Aura Stackers. So I'm going to go through each of these things and talk about what I believe and how good Aura Stacker will be. Now, Expedition League, in terms of Aura stacking, in terms of the actual league mechanic, it seems like it'll be fine. If you ever did like a Blight map or anything, which is probably pretty similar to how, what's it called, the Expedition, like, what's it called, the logbooks will be, you could pretty much just hold Spark down and it is very good and has very good coverage. So I'm assuming for the expeditions themselves, you can pretty much set up all the explosives and then you can detonate them and pretty much just stand in the middle AFK, and the Spark will clear everything, as you can precast the Sparks. If you're going to play Sparks, if you're going to play Brands, it's going to be good too. But I think Sparks will shine relatively well here in this type of content. Then you after everything blows up, you hold it all down, you go AFK for a little bit, and then you come back and you open the remnants and pick up your loot. And same goes for the logbooks, and I think it'll be pretty good. And most of these bosses, I hope, will be in an indoor arena, so it'll be good for Spark. But obviously Penance Brand will be fine. Now in terms of the Flask system rework, I do think that at the beginning level, it will be bad until you have really good clear speed. Basalt Flask we don't really generally use, so the combo has always been Diamond Flask, Bottle Fave, Cinder Swallow, Quicksilver of Adrenaline, and then one more utility flask, either Ziri's Promise or something. These flasks we would never use. You would never use Corundrum, Aquamarine, and Basalt Flask is now really bad in the early game in terms of giving you physical damage reduction. That's just 20% more armor now, so I would definitely not use it. Now, Warding Flask affects every build in the game, so now you pretty much cannot run Temp Chains, and you can't run Enfeeble maps no matter what. Enfeeble maps are actually extremely bad, as I'll show you later on in this clip that a viewer showed me, because he took off all his gear, or he didn't take off all his gear, he took off all his flasks, and then he ran an Enfeeble map, and you can see the results. And he also lowered all his support gems to level 1 to simulate what 3.15 will actually be like. I do think you will not ever use any of these Enkindling Orbs or Instilling Orbs. You may use it for like shock removal, because I think shock is probably one of the main things that gets you killed, but there's probably other ways to not get shocked. Now in terms of skill gems, which ones could we actually use is the main question. So we can't really use Rage Vortex, we can't use Earthbreaker, we can't use this. Defiance Banner is something that's kind of interesting. So Defiance Banner makes it so that we have more evasion and armor, so we will give us more evasion rating, but in the end it's just a lot worse than Dread Banner, which is just less damage taken. So this thing we would never use. We would never use Behead support. Storm Rain is an attack, so we can't really use it. Focus Ballista we can't use. Explosive Concoction is kind of interesting, but we don't have a Nebulous, and then we have to lose our glove slot to use face breakers or something like that. And that's just probably never going to work, right? And it's another attack skill, and we all know that attack skills do not scale very well with Aura Stackers. So ambush you would not use, Blade Trap you would not use, Voltaxic Burst is a chaos skill. It is a lightning skill, so it has a portion of lightning damage, so technically you can convert it to lightning and then you can convert it to cold, and then you'll be a cold and chaos player. But in the end, it's not going to work because you can't really convert cold to chaos, right? So this is a kind of an interesting skill. I'm not really sure how someone would actually utilize this skill, but I'm pretty sure that someone will come up with something good. Because the lightning and chaos skill is actually kind of weird in my opinion. You could technically use cold to fire and convert it somewhere. But not really sure. Not a huge fan of what's it called, skills that have multiple elements in general. And then Forbidden Right. Let's see about Forbidden Right. Can we use this? It is a spell. It is a chaos thing, but it deals % life and % ES. So again, another gem we cannot use. So I'm noticing a theme here. So Summon Reaper, we can't really use. We're not a summoner. Eye of Winter is probably one of the few skills we can use. But if you take a look at the skill's base damage, its effectiveness of added damage is 25%, and it deals 11 to 16 damage. And this is absolutely atrocious if you look at Winter Orb or something like that. Winter Orb's base damage blows this out of the water, even when you consider that all of these projectiles shotgun and all 8 of them hit the mobs. So if your damage is already lower than Winter Orb and is not a lightning skill, then it is probably not going to work out. But as always, if you have Infinity Gear, it would probably work, but with the damage nerfs of 50%, I do not think you could actually play cold skills anymore with the Aura Stacker and have it work. So nowadays, you probably have to play the most meta skills, which is the lightning skills, Penance Brand, and EK, I guess. So Mana Bond was a skill that I had a lot of hopes for, but in the end, it is a lightning skill that needs mana, and since we're an Aura Stacker, we don't have any unreserved mana, as it would just be anti-synergistic. So we can't use this either. So Battle Mage's Cry, can we use this? Technically, you could use it to trigger something, and it's actually not the worst idea in the world. You can have a Nebulous use a Battle Mage's Cry, and then you could trigger a support gem with this. So it could be interesting, not really sure if it's actually worth it. Probably not, as we're extremely short on support gems. Absolution is, I don't even really know what this skill is, but definitely not. We don't need any more summons at all. And then lastly, brings us to Spectral Helix, which is just like Spectral Throw, kind of. Modifies the number of projectiles instead applied to the number of bounces. This is kind of like the Hammered In skill from D2 or D3. So kind of disappointing actually after looking at the skill gems front for the Aura Stacker. Not really anything we could actually use that I see as being potentially a good skill, and the main reason for that is there's no fizz skills that's not an attack. So like even this thing, Rage Vortex, which is pretty cool, is not a fizz skill. So basically 0 fizz skills. Most of the new skills are attack based or some weird thing, and then chaos spells. And then the only cold spell that we could possibly use is extremely bad base damage. And then the Mana Bond skill is something we just can't use because we're not a mana based build. So here, nerf pure damage supports. So what I mean when like Chris says like 20 to 40% for most builds, I assume that the highest of the high-end builds that exploit all of the more multipliers, especially an Aura Stacker, will probably lead to around a 50% damage loss, but I really have no idea, right? We don't really know how much they're going to change the skills and which support gems they will change. Now, triggers won't really affect Aura Stackers at all. Movement skills, nerf to Smoke Mine. We usually use Smoke Mine for the Aura Stacker for mapping and then switch to Flame Dash for bossing. What this might mean is that I might use Shield Charge and Fortify or Leap Slam Fortify now that Smoke Mine is not so overpowered. And for the new uniques, the Ward seems terrible, honestly. I cannot imagine a world where Ward is actually good, but you never know. Maybe there's some way of scaling it, but having a tiny amount, so you get reduced 43 damage from your hit every like couple seconds or so. I don't really know if I'm missing something or if that number can just scale to infinity, but it just does not seem good at the moment. And PoE Royale, we can't play an Aura Stacker in PoE Royale, so not really sure about that. So basically, the main thing about the Aura Stacker is Aura Stacker has some of the highest damage outputs in the game while still having their survivability. So what this means is that because we have the highest damage output, we can still do the damage necessary. So this is one of my viewers. He's doing what's it called, 100% Delirium map, no flash, level 1 support gems, right? And you can see you can actually still clear it somehow. And the clear is not that bad. If you can see the mods of the map, it's Enfeeble, 88% increase effect, and then boss life, and I think that's about it, right? But basically, Enfeeble is extremely bad for crit builds. It's actually a huge nerf, so you can see that the damage is still there. This is a pretty min-maxed Aura Stacker. But then you get to the boss, right? And this is actually quite sad to see, right? This is actually not a bad arena for Spark. And it takes quite a while. I mean, Enfeeble and Monster Life is going to be no joke. Especially, this is probably too much nerfed. I think if you use all level 1 support gems and no flash, you're probably going to do about, I would dare say, probably like 15% or 20% of your actual damage. No flash is actually a pretty big thing. So, yeah, I'm not really sure how this is all going to shake up, but I just know that builds that are on the fringe will not be playable, and you probably should league start a build that's as strong as possible and not play something that has like gonna have bad single target. Because if a skill has bad single target now, just imagine in 3.15 it's gonna have even worse, and it's probably going to be 40% worse or so, 30% worse. So you can see this is a character that probably has like nearly all mirror gear, and it still struggles with doing 100% Delirium map without being able to remove your curse. So that is something to keep in mind when thinking about Aura Stackers. Is the damage will still be there because the damage is already so overkill on Aura Stackers, but that might mean that low life will be better, and that CI will probably never be playable, because CI is only playable because the damage is unnecessary. So I expect low life to be dominant because the damage for low life is literally double, and that damage alone should negate the nerfs. But that's what I think about Aura Stackers in 3.15. Still more than viable, unless they do some, some nerf to the cluster jewels, or nerf to auras, or nerf to reduce skill reservation. And now I wanted to talk about a little thing about Spark Necromancer. And I know that some of you might be looking to league start a Spark Necromancer, but because of the nerfs to damage, and already is not the best ascendancy, you should never league start a Spark Necromancer unless there's no unless. It will not be a good experience. The damage is already on the edge of not being good enough, and if the damage is not good enough, well, for a build that depends on having good damage to kill everything, it's going to be a bad experience. So make sure to roll a Scion if you want to do an Aura Stacker. A Scion has by far the highest damage potential combined with the tankiness that you will need. So that's just a general disclaimer. So do not play the Spark Necromancer as the league starter. And if you want to play an Aura Stacker, I highly recommend you do a Scion. A Scion is by far the best, and it is not really comparable. And Scion also gives you a lot more flexibility in your build. So if you want to do a brand build, having those extra 7 or 8 points is a huge benefit. So I think in the coming days, they will showcase more stuff for, for the patch notes. I think the Balance Manifesto will be out soon, and then they'll do the patch notes. So we'll know a lot more about the state of the game and what skills will actually be good. They do say expect a lot more nerfs, so we'll see what happens. But I hope that this video clears up a lot of what power creep actually is, what I think about nerfing of the campaign, and how Aura Stackers will be in 3.15. Now, power creep in the end is more knowledge-based, I think, than anything. Yeah, the ascendancies helped out a lot, but I do think that people making builds better and more efficiently than before with POB. And also, of course, like the ascendancies and stuff and cluster jewels were a huge power creep, and so was Harvest. Like, that's undeniable. But it's not like builds weren't really fast clearing before. Like, Vol Spark was insanely fast. Vol Fireball was insanely fast. So power creep is kind of weird in the way that they describe it, because players have always had the power. It's just, I don't really know. It's just they want to go in a different direction with the game currently. But now that almost everyone has access to the power instead of just a few, so now they want us to all be tuned back a little bit. But thanks for watching, everyone. And if you like the content, be sure to like and subscribe. And I hope you find more mirrors and exalts than I do. And see ya next time.